Hello, everyone. Welcome again. Uh, I'm glad to present now the teacher BA Elsa Galvan from Norte, right? Piedras Negras, Coahuila. And this presentation will show how you can implement collaborative learning in your classroom. If you have doubts on this method, know it well, make your life much easier as a teacher. Your students will learn better and they will be less anxious. They will view you in a more positive light and you will ace your teacher's evaluations. Tips and ideas will be given based on actual practice and also ways to cope with the challenges of this approach of learning. Okay. Elsa Galvan Estrada has been teaching English as a second language years now. She worked at Montessori de las Americas for 5 years, where she took students' delegations to Dallas, Texas, to attend a global elementary model of the United Nations to present their resolutions on topics such as nuclear energy, poverty, water, etc. She studied high school at St. Mary's Hall in San Antonio, Texas, and Science of Communications at Tecnológico de Monterrey. Please welcome Elsa Galvan.
Good afternoon. How are you? I, I hope you enjoyed your break and are relaxed and comfortable. And this is my first time as a speaker. So I brought some notes with me because I'm sorry I didn't learn all of it. But I will try my best to convey the information. Thank you. Okay. Today, I want to talk to you about collaborative learning. Um, did you know that collaborative learning has been here since the 1980s? Have you ever had classes in collaborative learning? Yes, so you more or less know what the approach is, right? In this presentation, we're going to discuss how to implement collaborative learning in your classroom, why it is vital to your well-being, and how you can implement it in your classroom. We will also see some examples of collaborative projects, and we will also look into problems you might have when using this approach in your projects and about problems and how to solve them. Okay, first, what is collaborative learning? What idea do we have about it? Collaborative learning is instruction that involves students working in teams to accomplish a common goal under conditions that include the following elements according to Johnson & Johnson and Smith, 1991. Positive interdependence. The team members need to rely on each other to accomplish a common goal. If any team member fails to do their part or their work, everyone suffers the consequences. Individual accountability. All students in a group are held accountable for doing their share of the work and for mastery of the material to be learned. Face-to-face promotive interaction. Although some of the group work may be done individually, some must be done interactively, with group members providing feedback, challenging each other's conclusions and reasoning, and perhaps more importantly, teaching and encouraging one another, okay? That's the most important part of collaborative work, the humanistic approach. How can you be more human, more compassionate, more understanding of your peers? It's about trying to make the students, no, trying to let them teach each other because when you teach something, you learn more, right? So that's what helps us have helpers in the classroom. Appropriate use of collaborative skills. Students are encourage and help to develop and practice trust building, leadership, decision making, communication, and conflict management skills. Group processing. Team members set group goals, periodically assess what they're doing well as a team, and identify changes they will make to function more effectively in the future. Because once you give a project, you're not going to want to stop giving them projects, and they are going to have to reflect on their work in order to get better. Just as teachers are asked to reflect on our teaching, well, the students are going to ask to reflect on their collaborative work. PANITS, T 1999. A good way for organizing the benefits of CL is to put them in categories. Johnson's 1989 and Patni's 1999 list over 50 benefits for CL. The list below is based on their works. They can be summarized into 4 major categories: social, psychological, academic, and of assessment as in following. Social benefits. CL helps to develop a support system for learners. Some learners, when they come into the classroom, don't know as much English as the others, right? And they might feel very insecure. But if they have a net, a protective net that supports them, they are going to enjoy your English classes better. So CL also leads to build diversity understanding among students and staff. We are all different, and in a group, we're going to meet each other's personalities and skills. We're going to share each other's skills and do a better job because, as you know, several heads think better than one. Okay. CL establishes a positive atmosphere for modeling and practicing cooperation. They often tell me, teacher, I want to do the work by myself. And I always say to them, but you need to help others. Don't you know that you cannot have all these gifts for yourself? You have to use them and share with the others, and you'll become a better person. CL develops learning communities. Psychological benefits. Student-centered instruction increases student self-esteem. Cooperation reduces anxiety. CL develops positive attitudes towards teachers. This is very important because, as you know, sometimes we try to teach the students as much as we can, and they start to resent it. Another worksheet, teacher, another drill. Why do we have to do this, and why do we have to do that? It's, oh, we did that yesterday again. So in order to prevent that, we need to do some variety in our classes, right? Academic benefits. CL promotes critical thinking skills. It involves students actively in the learning process. Classroom results are improved. Models appropriate student problem-solving techniques. No more students sitting down, sleeping while you're teaching, or texting each other, or telling each other the latest joke. Now you're going to have them working. Assessment. There are alternate student and teacher assessment techniques. Collaborative teaching techniques utilize a variety of assessments. Students have the opportunity to demonstrate their knowledge and skills in a written fashion. Since they now don't have to take an exam, or, well, it can be a part, you can give them a written exam and also grade them on an oral exam with a project, which is what we do, because they also need to be assessed in other ways. But now there's a variety. You not only have an exam because an exam with an exam, you won't know all the gifts and abilities they have to communicate in another language. What if the student is very able to communicate without so much grammar, or maybe he's really good at listening, and we don't know that unless we give them a project or to write, right? Studies show that students learn better when they are doing project and problem-based applied learning set in the context of their environment. The results were clear. Students experiencing environment-based applied learning scored better on standardized tests. Since the interaction with one's physical and social environments is essential for cognitive development. It's not the same. I sit here and I learn a lot of facts that if I share with other personalities, I am going to learn a lot more. And more importantly, if I am solving a problem in my environment, I have this question: why is there, I don't know, this problem of global warming? Why is it always raining and flooding in my city? And why don't the authorities do anything to prevent these problems? That's a good question for them to solve. Studies show that additional benefits included reduced discipline and classroom management problems, increased students' engagement and enthusiasm for learning, and greater student pride and ownership in accomplishments. The study also found that students increased in interpersonal abilities, and teachers reported feeling revitalized. I know you're going to think, oh, that's asking too much of a teacher. But it's the contrary, really. I'm going to tell you how not to work, how to have a party with drinks, food, music, and still have an exam. What is a project? An individual or collaborative enterprise that is carefully planned and designed to achieve a particular aim. Why should we do collaborative projects in the classroom? As John Spencer, 2070, puts it, ask people about the ultimate goal of education, and you'll probably get a phrase like lifelong learner, critical thinking citizen, or prepared for the real world. While these goals vary, there is the common idea that we want students to engage to become creative and to engage in critical thinking. We want them to be prepared to tackle the challenges of the creative economy. We often hear about the need for students to hit the 4 C's in 21st century learning: creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, communication, and we're nearly a fifth of the way into the 21st century, and yet we're still in a system where students passively consume content. However, I would argue that those 4 C's aren't 21st century skills. They're timeless skills. If we say we want students to become critical thinking lifelong learners, we need to provide projects that encourage them to engage in creative collaboration. But what does this look in each subject area? How do we turn this idea into a reality? It's not difficult to find teachers who find PBL a fun, engaging, and effective way to learn. It is, however, difficult for most educators to find the balance between implementing project-based lessons and teaching the standards. This is especially true for ESL teachers because a large part of the content that we teach is relatively concrete. For instance, grammar and sentence structure are most commonly taught through worksheets, drills, and rote memorization. thinking outside of the box and trying to teach these critical skills through a project can be extremely challenging for some teachers. Discouraged, don't despair. Although implementing PBL in the ESL classroom may require some creativity, it is certainly possible. As a teacher, you will be working with your students throughout the entire project to give feedback, address misconceptions, and help them make sense of difficult material. Although, once your students become familiar with the procedures of collaborative projects, they will breeze through them and enjoy projects immensely. We will later talk about how you can avoid having to correct grammar mistakes and pronunciation, as well as giving ideas on how to make the writing more creative and interesting. You will not have to assess your students, as they will assess each other and themselves, and they will reflect on what they did well, what went wrong, and what to improve in their next projects. There are many projects you can implement in your classroom. Students can investigate a problem and find a solution, which is PBL. PBL is not the same as hands-on learning on, or learning in cooperative groups. Although these things happen in project-based lessons. What sets PBL aside from all of this is that everything is driven by the student's quest to answer the central question. Ideally, PBL is also student-centered and driven, which is not always true for group or hands-on activities. Okay, what do we mean by student-centered? That is something very convenient for you. It means that they are going to do most of the work and you're only going to lead the way. And you won't have to work as hard. And the most interesting thing is that they will love you for it. They will be very pleased to have you as a teacher. And they're going to say, oh, what's the next project? Project-based learning lessons are all based on solving a central question or problem. Ideally, these questions or problems are the ones that are posed by students. When students ask questions, this shows that they are actively engaged and thinking about the material. Hopefully, some of these questions can prompt further research, exploration, and study. This is the beginning of PBL. Okay, you're going to say, what? Am I going to let them think about anything and then make a project? Well, sometimes it is possible, and sometimes you have to give them a hint. Why don't you investigate about this? Look, there are some reading and articles, or we're going to watch a few videos. What do you think of this problem? And then they might think that they pose the question themselves. Conduct research to explore the project's essential question. This is the part where your students will delve into the bulk of the investigation. This may include conducting interviews, internet research, reading books, watching documentaries, or anything else that helps the students explore the driving question. And they might give you a suggestion. Teacher, why don't I look this information somewhere, you don't know, a web page or something? Say, yeah, why don't you? Go ahead, look wherever you can find information about this topic. Okay. And supporting your students. ESL students will inherently need additional support for this step. You may want to add a little work for your students. You may want to do a little work for your students by doing some of the research for them and narrowing it down to a few level appropriate articles from which they can choose. For example, you can tell them to explore the most important world's problems, global warming, etc. whatever, whatever global problem you can think of. Should students only speak in English while working on PBL? During the project, you should certainly encourage use of the English language as much as possible. However, there will be times where your students need to communicate or process new information in their native language. Remember that PBL requires a lot from the student cognitively in comparison to traditional teaching methods. They are constantly communicating, analyzing, and creating. And ELLs are doing this all while navigating the material in a foreign language. In other levels, you may need to develop easier projects according to the ability of each group. Each group is different. You can think, oh, they're not going to like this investigation. Why don't I think something that they can do and like and that is useful for my class? You can implement a project all the same with all the characteristics of a collaborative project. The students will have a support system. They will help and correct each other and give each other ideas as well as assess themselves. Video projects. In most ESL classes, there comes a time when students must prove their oral skills, either through a speaking exam or an oral examination. I mostly give the students these projects during an oral examination, and we also give them a written exam, and we also give them grades on their homework and so on. It can be like 20% of their grade. Traditionally, these are done orally in front of the class, but using video for the oral presentation may calm some nerves and allow for a lot of creativity on the student's part. It's up to the teacher to assign a project that works for the level, assesses the target grammar and vocabulary, and gives the student a chance to demonstrate their progress in a creative and fun way. And no extra equipment or software is necessary because the students can make and edit videos right from their smartphones or tablets. And they really love it. They really love it. Plays. Play acting is a great way for students to show off their skills and abilities in a non-written fashion. Every topic they investigate can be acted out. It will be more entertaining than just sharing information. It will spice up that information and help students understand topics or tricky situations, although they will need to write their dialogues. So there's no reason to panic. Grammar structures and vocabulary can be reviewed in this way. How do we apply collaborative projects in the ESL classroom? First thing we have to do is divide the students in teams of 4 to 6 students maximum. Mostly, they tell you to have a small group, but since in my case I have 6 lessons, I give the one lesson for each student, and they have to use the grammar and vocabulary in that unit, and that's how I divide them into 6 or 4, depending on the lessons I want them to master. And you can do the same. You can do, oh, it's going to be a 3-person team, 4-person team, whatever your needs are. Okay. Then we need to give them roles, as well as presenting a video, presentation, investigation. You need to give them a role. The role is what's going to help you not work. For example, we're going to see that later, but that's how you're going to get helpers to do the work that it needs to be done in order to have a presentation. Give them indicators. Oh, sorry. Explain the project's theme. What are they going to work on? Ideally, you have to let them pose a question, but if they're not able to do so, or if it's more convenient for your classes, you can lead them a certain way. Give them indicators. The project topic, methodology, expected products, evaluation, references, and rubrics. We need to take into account their interests, their environment, their studies. Find a topic that affects their lives. For example, world problems. Okay. Technology by 2050. Technologies for the future. Talking about the future. In this project, the learners had to use the grammar and vocabulary in 6 lessons and investigate a science breakthrough. They had to practice the skills of talking about future plans, predicting future events, and making predictions about future technology. What is this? The grammar that I gave them in the lesson. They were able to talk about robots, cure for sicknesses, new food sources, energy sources, etc. They were encouraged to investigate and even create new inventions which would make their lives more comfortable. They always can invent or do something that is not real, to use their imagination as much as possible. And this is what they did. We don't have that. What is that? What do you think? A time machine. Yes, this is a time machine, and it was done out of cardboard, wire, and paint. And it was so much fun for them. Festivals. When the students have to investigate a festival in a foreign country, they are learning about customs and a culture different from theirs. At the same time, festivals have many things in common: fireworks, parades, special food, traditional clothes. This type of project is excellent for increasing a students' critical thinking. In this project, there were 6 teammates, and each used the grammar and vocabulary in 6 units to write a paragraph about the festival. They also wore costumes and prepared special food. They also used PowerPoint presentations in their oral exam, and at the same time, it helped them to prepare for their midterm exam. Okay. St. Patrick's Festival. In this project, team members brought traditional food, which has to be green, green drink, green cupcakes, and green jello. They made their costumes out of paper, cloth, and cardboard. Okay, these are paper clothes. The only thing that they put cloth on was the hat, because they had this piece of cloth and they wanted to use it for that. But they don't have to be anything expensive. Trial show. A famous trial show. This project was built taking into account the interests of law students, although you can utilize it for other study programs, since it's always exciting to solve crimes. In this project, the learners produced a famous trial like the ones on TV shows or Netflix, and they had to review the structures and functions in lessons 1 through 6. They also investigated legal vocabulary and expressions in court. They dressed like lawyers, the judges, witnesses, victims, and perpetrators. And here are the students. See, they're wearing robes, and they're dressed like lawyers. In this type of project, the students enjoy tremendously dressing their part. Okay. Now I would like you to view a very short video. It's not very long, since I only asked them to speak for 1 minute. But the thing is, I think I'm having problems with the sound. Can someone help me, please? I don't think there's a sound for the video.
Yeah, but it didn't work with Martin. What they did was to put the mic on the laptop. Okay. Yeah. On the laptop here, mic.
The present day, October 6 at 7 a.m., the trial behind against Mr. Julio Cesar, which accused killing Mr. Nino Gonzalez at his home on October 4th of this year. We hear what the prosecutor has to say.
Thank you, Your Honor. I address you and the public with great respect. This man is guilty of a murder. He killed Mr. Nino Gonzalez, nailing a knife in his back at the height of the heart. On October 4th, at 10 o'clock p.m., at the victim's house, I have here in my hands the main evidence, the knife with which he left the victim without vital signs.
This evidence is going to be analyzed by our specialist. The defense can start his allegation.
Your Honor, my client is innocent. We can prove that at the time of the fact, he was working at his taco spot located in Zaragoza Street of the city. And we have a witness, Mr. Lisbeth, she is a customer and Shebui Tacos to Julio Cesar.
The witness pass. Please Lisbeth, videos, use type on fact.
Good morning. My name is Lisbeth Cabello Samarripa, and I am dentist. My dentist center is for the Julio Cesar business. And very day when I finish working, I go home to have dinner with my family. On Wednesday, October 4th, it was not the inspection. I left work at 10 p.m. and went for my tacos. One day was Julio Cesar selling tacos.
Well, we are present, you spent. Thank you. The prosecutor wants to add something?
Yes, you, I will never kill anyone. Please don't condemn me. I need to work to give my children the only happy.
Well, since we have a witness and killness handed over by the prosecutor, and we Nostras perform. I declare Mr. Julio innocent.
As you can see, these students were not very advanced. Actually, they are A2, yes, according to the Common European Framework. So their level in the university is level 3, but they were able to produce a video with the structures that I asked them to use, and they created it. I didn't tell them, do this, do that. It was completely their creativity. Yes. Okay. This is another type of project that they love. Emergency room interview. In this project, learners had again to use the grammar and vocabulary in 6 lessons. And in order to find out information about a patient who had been injured, they had to make use of some basic terminology, vocabulary from the lessons. They needed to receive the patient, that's one of the functions in the book, take his medical information, give him a treatment. Everything is in their book. Listen to his regrets, talk about his life, performances, or shows. Because they had basically a famous person who had been injured, and they were the doctors who had to give the famous person treatment. In this type of project, the students greatly enjoy dressing as doctors, nurses, and patients. They love wearing casts, bandages, and wearing makeup injuries. Okay, here's another video. A very short video, I promise, and this will be the last one.
Hello, Dr. David. What are you doing in your weekend? It was good. The mind was bored and lot of work. The hospital and the dad was all for me. Oh my God! Vamos Anna, she won the elections the last year, and now she is the group leader of the last class. And she came with Lisbeth, his famous best friend. She sing at Madison Square Garden with Rihanna the last year.
That's me.
Good luck, I am 24 with I take breaks for students and only paying time.
Nice girls. What you doing? What you doing here? All good?
Not yet. After I won the elections, we traveled to New York to celebrate. We hung out and there we take some drinks, ate pizza, but there the water changed a lot and now we feel so sick.
Oh, I say, here is my coworker, the Dr. Cesar. The Dr. Cesar. He listened too, and he wanna help you because I had to leave. Well, frequent time, the boy here can watch TV. Don't have don't eat too late. Don't have to school. Don't eat. Oh, here, show the car, take a rest at the home, and sleep like 10 hours. Here's how we try and wear it. No, my cover gamma will I sometime. Help me. Just have to say yes or no. I feel any of symptoms. Irritability,
Yes.
male sensitivity to light or noise,
Yes.
vomit,
Yes.
fatigue and weakness,
Yes.
muscle aches,
Yes.
nausea, vomiting, or stomach pain,
Yes.
poor or decreased sleep,
Yes.
increased sensitivity to light and so.
Yes.
Anaí, Lisbeth, go ahead, please. Sit down, please. Hello, ladies. I'm the Dr. Ivan. I'm gonna help you, but first, with the information who you gave to Caesar, I have to do some studies with the new equipment of the hospital. Put the small finger here, please. The small finger, please. All right. And you, please. Okay. Uh, in 5 seconds, we're gonna have a result. Let's do it. Well, ladies, first I think you got a headache, but now I know what you girls have, and it's just a hangover. I recommend don't drink anymore, and if you do, it's just a shot. If you drink a lot, you girls have bad experience. Okay? We'll see you later.
As you can see, they had to make an invention. The little thing, the stethoscope was a machine that read their symptoms. And this was thought out for medical students, but it works for any type of study program. Everyone loves being a doctor or being sick or getting attention. Okay, this, sorry about that. Bájale el volumen para que no se oiga tan- All right. This project is about intercultural conflicts. In this project, the learners had to explore intercultural conflicts. In addition, they had to use the models of deduction, could, might, must, among other structures. They also had to review the grammar and vocabulary in 6 lessons. This type of project is interesting and useful to the students because it increases their critical thinking. We're dealing with people from other countries and cultures. Okay. Yes.
The vocabulary they have learned in 6 lessons?
Yes.
And how much time do you give them then to prepare for these projects?
Okay, as has been said before, you must not give them too much time or they will waste it. So what I do is I give them the 6 lessons and then I ask them, you have 1 week to prepare everything.
Okay.
And since it's before their electronic exam, they review all the pages in the book, but it doesn't feel like a review. It feels like they're having fun.
Okay, and this is PBL or among with collaborative?
Okay, it can have
Both
a
is the
problem
combination.
as a basis, but maybe works more for advanced students like the 5th level. But in that case, you can also have to help them, you know. You have to tell them, oh, why don't you write an introduction? And you have to explain that. And why don't you write a conclusion? And you explain that too. And that works for the 5th level. But if you have lower levels, as these students were in the 3rd level and they were A2 students, you have to be more specific on what you want so that they can review the structures that you want them to review.
Okay, but it's basically 1 week preparation for the students.
Yes, only 1 week.
Okay,
And you
thank you.
won't do anything. They will do everything. Okay, designing your project. Now that we have talked about topics or the question that will guide the project, as in PBL, we need to design a plan that lays out clear steps to follow. Decide what standards you want to address in the project, figure out how you will assess the students' understanding of those standards, and outline the materials and resources you will need. This plan will serve as a guide to prepare you to assist your students throughout the learning process and also keep you focused on your learning objectives because you also need to be focused on the objectives. Okay, the project's indicators. Objectives, language and collaborative. As I don't know if I mentioned this before, but the students will have 2 jobs. One is to present information as an actor or read a paragraph, talk about something. And they also have to be helpers of each other. They have to do something that helps the production of the presentation, video, play, whatever you choose. The time, you have to give them a time. You also can choose your time. You can say it's going to be a 2-week project or I'm going to help them a little every day. It depends on the time you have. As I have very short time and my classes are 40-minute lessons, that's why I implemented collaborative learning in my classroom, because that's the way I don't work as much and the students are happy and they learn more. Okay, the roles they are going to take in the project. The roles are your little helpers. The products they are going to turn in. What do you want them to give you as evidence for their work? Because you're going to need evidence, since you're not going to know when they work. They're going to be independent from you. The sources where they can get information. As we said before, some students need more leading than others, and it depends on their level. the references and how to add them to the project. You have to sometimes talk to them about plagiarism and things that they don't know. The rubrics, so that they can see how they're going to be evaluated, because they're going to say, teacher, but how are you going to grade me? What do I have to do well? And it's better if you give them a rubric because they know what you're going to grade. You also need to talk to them about values and how they are important for the success of the team, because they're always going to say, I don't want to work with so and so. And then you have to talk to them. Sometimes that helps, and sometimes you have to change them to another group. This is an example of a language objective. To use the grammar and vocabulary in such lessons. And that's about the project. What is it going to be about? Well, we're going to work on intercultural projects. Yes? And in order to engage them in critical thinking, they should also look for a solution to the conflict. For example, let's say, why in this country they respect certain days? What is the conflict? That the people now live in another country and they want to celebrate their holidays. What's the solution to the conflict? Collaborative objectives. The students will cooperate with each other on improving their speaking abilities, as well as on presenting the information creatively through the effective use of body language, visual, oral, and technological aids. Each student will need to speak their part in the project and perform a collaborative role. So we're making an emphasis not only on spoken language, but also other things like body language, or how they dress, how the audience is going to perceive them as a doctor, as a nurse. And they also use presentations in order to set the stage. For example, if they're in a hospital, they put images of a hospital. And that's easy for them. They don't have to spend anything. A values example. We already talked about that. Yes. 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 Ujú. Oh. ¿Dentro de cuántos? Ah, all right. I am sorry. We're going to have to end the presentation, but do you have some written material? Because I had some pages. Yes, well, there you're going to have the roles. Well, I'm going to explain it really fast. Okay, here's where you can look, you tell your students to look for some videos to get information. Ay, déjame ver. All right, this is all about the presentation. And this is about your helpers, the writer who will check that the other people's dialogues are creative and interesting. He's not going to write the dialogues, but he's only going to check for creativity. The editor puts everything in a PowerPoint presentation, including dialogues, pictures, etc. The director makes sure everyone understands instructions and is like a director in a movie. Yes, he evaluates the acting part, the voice level, etc. And we have a grammar expert who will check the teammates' mistakes and give them to me in a page in the other students' drafts. And we have the sound expert who will check the other teammates' pronunciation. And he will write on the page the correct pronunciation and give them a second review. And we have the producer. The producer is going to check that everyone is participating with values of respect, collaboration, etc. He's like the boss. He's going to tell, for example, you have to share your ideas with the others. For example, there's someone that's always the strongest member, and he wants all his ideas to appear on the presentation, but the producer will say, so and so has also important ideas, and let's take them into account. And here are the rubrics. I am giving them to you in your pages, and these are the activities. The activities that you're going to check. You're going to give, the students are going to evaluate themselves. The director is going to fill this page after the presentation, and he's going to check, for example, did he use the vocabulary and grammar structures required? And he's going to give the person 4 points. And so on. You have them in your worksheet. And over here, you're going to get an individual evaluation of the students. On top, go M1, M2, member 1, member 2, go the names of the people. And on this side, you're going to ask them to write comments, because that's how you're going to check that they did their work. For example, if one of the members is a weak member and doesn't pronounce well, the director has to say, we tried to help him to speak better, and we gave him 3 reviews, or 3 practices to improve. And that way I won't subtract points from their grade. And this is the other collaboration form, which is going to be filled by the producer. We also have questions here, and we put the name of the members here, the individual score here, and the group score over here. You're going to ask them to write comments before the presentation. For example, we had this problem, and there were some people that had bad pronunciation, but we made them practice several times, which meaning it was not our fault, because we tried to help them. Oh, and I also gave you a reflection. I gave you the type of questions that they must fill in after they do the presentation. You're going to ask them to reflect, as, for example, we teachers are asked to reflect. The students are asked to reflect on their work as a group. For example, they might say, the pronunciation and fluency were very good. This is the things that they did well. Everybody searched their information. This is what they didn't do right, the weaknesses. Some people in the team read their information in order to speak it. And also some members spoke in a very low tone of voice. Collaboration. Nobody studied their information. The costumes and set weren't very good, and we didn't practice our dialogues. For example, they can say that. And what can be done in order to get better? For example, in language, we must study our information, and we need to speak more loudly. And collaboration, we have to be more responsible with our assignments. And these are problems that you might have when doing this kind of approach. And I was hoping I had some time to clarify problems and how to solve them, but I think I don't have that much time. Well, if you want to take a picture, here is all the information. You can do that. Yes? And this is with the people that don't work. What do you do when people don't work? Well, you can have grand rules. You can agree on having rules for the project. another way to solve this problem is the way I told you. They write comments, they say that they practice with the weakest member, and that way I won't subtract points from their grade. Oh, and this is the most important. They have to turn in a folder with everything in it, all the dialogues and all the corrections that the grammar did, that sound expert did, and the writer, the creative ideas that he gave. Everything must be in writing. And that's the way you can grade their work, with comments, with pictures. For example, the director has to take a picture of the group practicing, and that's the way you can really know if they if they worked outside the classroom. With this project, you will review all the grammar structures that you need for the exam. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Elsa, for your contribution to this event. And the coordination has a present for you. Thank you. Guys, we have a 5 minutes break, only 2 to 5 minutes because we are a little delay.
Espérame. Eso. Muy seria.
Thank you. Your attention, please. We are going to continue. Uh, the next turn is for VA Evelyn Garza with the conference speaking challenge. This presentation offers the opportunity to identify and understand the main reasons why usually students do not speak as much as teachers would like them in the ELT. It will provide insight of how to make peace with the known ideal situations that might affect and make the most out of them. Most importantly, the aim of this session is to provide teachers with ideas to fight each of those reasons in order to get students talking. Ms. Evelyn Alicia Garcia Hernandez has been an English teacher for 14 years, and 9 of those at the Universidad Autónoma de Coahuila. She has a degree on communication and is finishing her master in ELT. She has been a delegate at the United Nations and has coached debaters, public speakers, and directed schools plays in English. So please welcome Ms. Evelyn Garcia.
Garza. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So I know that most of you are with your minds out of this event already. So I'm gonna try to be brief. I'll promise that I'll try. But can you promise me something in exchange? Yes, promise, promise. Okay, I was going to take some time of my conference to have you answer a survey that is not about the event. If you answer the survey, you will be contributing to deeper research. But I won't take time into the conference if you promise to do it later. I will show you how, and you will, okay? You promised. Okay, so when I was deciding, I wanted to talk about speaking because this is the subject of my dissertation, and is not the subject that I chose because it's my strength. The opposite is actually my weakness. And I believe it's not only mine, but from also many other teachers share this. So I wanted to do a deep research on speaking. And when I was thinking of the title for my conference, I thought of Speaking Challenge, maybe because this is a trendy word nowadays, but also because this is what it represents for me. Making my students to speak, it's a big challenge. And actually, I found out while doing my presentation that there is a speaking challenge on YouTube that teenagers are doing now. I'm going to talk about that later because we're going to try something. Okay? So why is speaking a challenge? There is an issue that happens to me, and this is that when I ask a question in my classroom, in English, obviously, many of the times my students remain silent, just looking at me with their eyes wide open. And sometimes, when we are in an activity or in a regular class, I give them instructions to work in pairs or teams, but once I walk away from each team, they start communicating, but in Spanish. And this phenomena made me feel very frustrated, but I investigated that it's called by experts reticence, and it might include both. This phenomena is when the student is reluctant to use the target language. It doesn't matter if it's because they don't speak at all, or if it is because they only use L1, but they are just not using the target language. And I felt very frustrated because I thought it only happened to me, that I was doing many things wrong, which I was, and I am doing many things wrong. But there are many studies that were conducted all around the world, and this was because many teachers were also feeling frustrated on this subject, on this area. And I'm going to be sharing some of the results of them with you today. So why is this so frustrating or so important if, as Thornbury says, learning English doesn't equal to speaking English? If you think about it, how many times have you heard your students say, "Teacher, I perfectly understand everything that you're saying, or I can understand what I read, but I cannot speak. Yes, I cannot produce the language." And it's very important that we make this distinction, because we have to let them know that they do know the language. It's just that the area of improvement is speaking, but speaking is just a part of the language. And maybe we are going to help build confidence. But why is this part so important? Obviously, with the communicative approach being on everyone's mouth nowadays, we feel very frustrated when we don't have communicative classes. But Swan said that the communicative approach is not here to make us feel guilty, because that's how we feel many times when we are focusing too much on grammar and not making activities more communicative. But that more than the communicative approach, we should take a look and see it as a context approach. So am I doing the most communicative I can with the situation and tools that I'm given? That's what we should think about, and we wouldn't feel as bad. Obviously, communication is the end of, it's a great end for using the language, but also speaking is very important because it's the practice of the language, and it's the feedback. It's the immediate feedback that we as teachers can receive of how well our students are understanding everything that we're teaching. But it's also a feedback for the student, because the students feel when they don't produce the language, they feel that they don't know it. So obviously, in order to build their confidence, we have to help them out. Now, these phenomena, on the many studies that I've read about, they basically blame three characters, which obviously are the most important ones in everything that has to do with ELT. The first one is the institution, and I mean like decision makers, the syllabus, etc., the program itself, etc., things that might not be on the teachers, up to the teachers to decide. But obviously, there are many other things that we are doing right or wrong towards helping our students to speak. And obviously, there is also things like Pat was mentioning yesterday, things regarding the student that if they change, they could be benefiting from it. And even though this is on the students, there are things that we can do to help them, or even by making them aware of this, we will also be helping. So what is the what is the school, what is the school doing wrong or not helping towards better speaking skills? First of all, the teacher training. A study that was carried out in a university in Colombia showed that we teachers tend to imitate the teachers we had. So whether they had mistakes or good deeds, both of them, we replicate them in our classrooms, which makes perfect sense. And so therefore, they weren't, the institution wasn't paying enough attention to correcting those mistakes through training. The other aspect that is up to the institution is that, as we all know, levels are hardly ever balanced or even. We have very high proficient speakers and very low achievers. And so if the institution could do something about it to have the levels where they actually belong, no matter the semester they are coursing on their major, obviously that will help us a lot and help the student. And I mean, I'm saying this, I know that maybe we're not decision makers, but we can always propose and see what can be changed. The other thing is standardized testing. And it's not that standardized testing shouldn't exist, it's just that it might be affecting speaking in two ways. The first one is that if at the end of the program that an institution offers, the test that I'm going to certificate you with, that you completed my program, is more focused on accuracy, like grammar, vocabulary, structures, then I have to let you know, you learner and you teacher, that my program is to teach you maybe writing and reading. And there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, the wrong would be making false promises that I cannot achieve because I'm testing something at the end and in the class didn't match it. And the other problem with the standardized testing is that it's not only the test at the end of the program, but also the test on the midterms. So if on every midterm, my grading criteria are, for example, 80% the written test or an essay where I'm going to check accuracy, grammar, then the other 10, I don't know, whatever activities, and the other 10 speaking. Obviously, the teacher is going to be dedicating more time, and the students are going to be asking them to dedicate more time to grammar and accuracy than spending time on speaking skills. And this is something that it's very logical, it makes sense. So many institutions don't have, well, depending on the standard test that they have, either on the midterm or at the end, is the book they select. And sometimes the textbook is also not very communicative. It's not very appropriate if I want to teach speaking. And even worse, sometimes I don't have a syllabus as an institution, but I use my textbook as such. So these should be things that they should be paying attention to. How can I be correcting that? Obviously, offering teacher training. It's not the same, and we all know this, but we are skipping it. It's not the same to know the language than to be able to teach a language, than to be able to teach how to speak the language. maybe I'm very good at teaching English because I know the grammar and the rules, but do I know how to teach speaking? Did I ever receive training on that? So institutions, that's something that obviously we teachers can look for training on our own, but it's very important for the institution to provide it as well. Also, as I mentioned, the standard test, which should have a higher percentage on speaking if I want my learners to be able to speak at the end. If I don't change this, it's very unlikely that any changes are going to be made. And also, they need to have a needs analysis, and this is for what I was mentioning about evening the levels. And obviously, because we could have a lesson, a syllabus or a timetable more appropriate to what the student is actually lacking of knowledge. So maybe on my book, on my textbook, I have that they need to learn the verb to be and then the simple present and then, but if I have a test at the beginning of the course, maybe I see that they already know how to use the verb to be. So time is not wasted on teaching that, but focusing more on what they actually need. And obviously, this having always as an objective, speaking. So regarding the student, sometimes the problem with students is that they are either too shy or they have a negative attitude towards the language. And this is something that we have to make peace with. We are always going to have students who are never going to be able, I mean, not never, maybe sometime, but not while we watch them, not in our classes, or maybe never. we have to accept, because this doesn't mean that we are going to stop trying. This just means that it's not going to get me frustrated, because when we get frustrated, we run out of ideas on how to approach those problems. So we're always going to have some students in our class who are going to have some struggle with it. Now, however, most of the studies showed that the reticence in students regarding them is because of anxiety. They feel anxious. And it's either because they lack vocabulary, they feel very incompetent on the language, therefore they lack confidence, they don't have a motivation, or they fear to be humiliated. And this has something to do with our culture. For example, in Asia, most of the studies about reticence show that they remain quiet because the figure of the teacher represents authority that I shouldn't be answering to at all. But in our culture, it's more related to, I know that if I say something wrong, everyone is going to laugh at me. So that's something that obviously I need to create an environment where my students can feel safe to say whatever they're able to produce. I always tell my students that we shouldn't be laughing at others, but we should be learning to laugh at ourselves. It's okay to make mistakes. That's how you learn. And how can I correct this? Well, first of all, obviously, if I teach them more vocabulary, and this is something tricky because on the books that we usually have, they give you a matching exercise or a labeling exercise, but that doesn't mean teaching vocabulary. Studies show that a student has to use a word in their class and at least on some follow-up lessons in order to acquire that term. Otherwise, we just show that, but they're not actually making it theirs. And the other thing that would also reduce lack of confidence and the fear of being humiliated is teaching pronunciation. Now, I don't know about you, but being very honest, this is usually what I leave aside because we don't have time. And maybe because also we don't have enough training on that. So what we can do, some suggestions from experts are that even short drillings or just exposure to the language, either from me or from music videos, etc., also counts as showing them how the words are to be pronounced so that they gain more confidence. And motivation it will be a whole different topic, but just to address it because it was one of the issues, we have to ask them, because sometimes I don't even know what they want or how they see themselves on the future. And they always say, with a good job, a stable job. Okay, and does that job require that you speak English? Because if they can picture this, maybe it's going to help them get motivated. But maybe sometimes this is not their motivation because they are not picturing themselves on a job where they're going to use English. So we have to learn to approach each of the interests of our students. Maybe for our generation, just knowing that speaking English was going to give you a higher pay was enough. But for them, what I'm finding recently is that we have to let them know that if they speak English, they'll be able to travel more to different countries and communicate with different people, to have their ideas be heard, or to just receive entertainment from different countries and be able to actually enjoy it. So they have different sorts of motivation. Okay, now regarding the teacher, what are some of the many things that we might be doing wrong? And obviously, each of these will vary on the degree on how they are affecting depending on each context. But one that I think applies for most teachers is that we overcorrect our students. We become grammar Nazis. And this is very difficult for us to notice because we have almost been programmed to detect all the errors. But if I'm aware of this, I'll be able to make smarter choices about it on when it is right to correct or not. The other thing is the teacher talking time, the TTT. This is also something that experts show. If I'm doing all the talking in the class, then that means that my students, maybe it's not because they don't know or because they can't or because they don't want to, it's because I'm not even letting them to. I'm not giving them the opportunity to speak at class. The other aspect, and this really caught my attention because I think this is something that I make a lot, is the waiting time. There was a study in Asia, and they were seeing that teachers, it has several stages, but briefly, they could see how teachers ask for a question, wait for like 3 or 5 seconds, and then, okay, no one, okay, so this is. We are we're always in a hurry, but learning takes time. Maybe it's not that the students do not know how to answer or that they weren't going to. It's that they are processing the information that you just gave them, and they are trying to, make the right answer on their minds in order to feel confident to speak it out. But we need to give them some time. Obviously, the types of activities. If we don't give activities, if all our activities are, okay, do the matching exercise, write 3 sentences. Obviously, this is not allowing speaking to happen in the class. And also the interaction patterns. And there are several studies that show that a balance between these two can make a whole difference towards speaking. If I have the right activity with the right interaction pattern, because sometimes maybe we thought of an activity, but we used it in groups, and it was better if they did it in pairs. So it's something that we have to think carefully. So now that we are aware of the many things that are wrong or that might be going wrong in our classrooms, I should mention that this is the first step. If we are not aware, maybe I don't even realize what I'm doing wrong. So awareness is a very important step. And I'm going to summarize the tips that the studies that I read for this give in order to correct the mistakes regarding the teacher, in order to allow speaking. First of all, and I think this is something also very important to highlight, is that sometimes, or most of the time, the speaking we do in class is the speaking that we use as a mean. And this means, for example, if I just taught my students the daily routines and I tell them, okay, this is in simple present. Tell your classmate what is your daily routine. I'm using speaking not because they wanted to communicate something they were interested on or just for the sake of communicating, but I'm using it to reinforce grammar. So speaking was just the mean, okay? And what I should be looking for more is speaking when it has as a name communicating, and this means when speaking is the end. So we have to be careful when we are using it. It's not wrong because at least we're making them speak. And obviously, speaking should also be graded. First, they need some of this in order to achieve some of that. But also, I have to dedicate more time on purpose to using speaking as an end. Because obviously, there is a difference when I use speaking as a mean. I'm focusing on accuracy, that while they're speaking, they're using correctly what they just learned or what they were supposed to learn. But when I use speaking as an end, I just care for fluency. I don't care if they're making mistakes. And this is obviously also going to reduce the mistake that we make of overcorrecting our students. Okay, some of the tools or recommendations that the experts also make is scaffolding. I like to, especially with levels 4 and 5, to sometimes run some debates in the class, and I give them the topics that I know they'll be interested in, and they care so much for the content or for defending their opinion that they don't know how to work transition phrases. So what I do is that I usually give them a list on the board. Okay, I understand what you're saying, and I agree to a certain extent. However, you're not taking into consideration they wouldn't be able to maybe produce that on themselves. However, because I give them the phrases, they say it, and they even feel confident that they sound so proper. So this is the type of scaffolding, giving them the vocabulary they're going to use on a certain activity. Also, drilling. I know that sometimes we stigmatize drilling so much or repeating because we think it's boring, but speaking should also be graded, like reading. So for lower levels, it actually helps them build confidence, and this is also like a pronunciation exercise that we were mentioning earlier. So obviously, maybe with my lowest levels, I'm going to be saying, okay, my name is, and you repeat, my name is. But with higher levels, maybe I can start changing some words or phrases and making this more challenging and interesting for them. Another thing that they mentioned is modeling. I have this activity with that I copied from a teacher, it's not mine. I have this activity with the used to be, with the used to, with the grammar point of used to. And I find it fun because they have to discover, they have a list of sentences of things that they used to do in high school, but now how they have changed, and they have to go around and find the people. Anyway, it is somehow a complicated activity. And I always felt very frustrated because they did it wrong and we didn't come to the right answer and stuff. But then I read about this modeling thing, and I started doing it myself with one of my students and showing them, okay, so you're going to do and ask this and this, ask me. And then I thought that if I did that, I was wasting time, and time is the least we have. But actually, I'm investing time for my activity to be more successful because they already know what they're doing. Just because I know in my mind what I want them to do doesn't mean that they are clear on it. And also, and this is something that I have to work on a lot, patience. And these patience, I mean, for the waiting times, to be comfortable with silences in class, because they do need some silence. And I'm really bad at that, but I'm trying to work on it. But also patience to not correct everything. I know that we say I can't help myself. It just comes out. They say something that I always do. They say, for since the word since 1994, they always say science, and immediately I come up, since, and until, okay, right now we are not reviewing that. When we are, obviously you have to correct them, and obviously appropriately. But if we are not learning that, well, just let them by, breathe, and try not to overcorrect them. And so, so patience to make peace with silence, patience to make peace with errors, but also patience to make peace with students not being able to sometimes, and that's okay. And it's not their fault. I mean, whoever attended yesterday the workshop for multiple intelligences, they might not be very strong on languages. But this shouldn't frustrate me, and this shouldn't mean that I stop trying. To reduce, this was in the University of Birmingham, a teacher taped herself for several lessons to measure her TTT. And she obviously found that it was way higher than students talking time. And she started trying to make small changes to see which ones work better to reduce teacher talking time and therefore allowing more time for the students to speak. And to reduce the teacher talking time, the three that she found the most important was giving clear instructions one at a time. Because what we do sometimes is that we say, okay, on page 72, first you're going to underline, and then you're going to write sentences with those, and then you're going to talk to your classmate about it. Do it. And you just, you just think, you just believe that they understood everything you want them to do, that they're not going to forget, and that they will actually do it. But what she found is that she had to interrupt, and I could really relate myself to that. She had to interrupt several times the class to say, no, that's not what we're doing, okay? What we're doing, and that, because you thought you were saving time, you were actually spending more time on correcting your unclear instructions. So she found that the first thing was when she gave clearer instructions, students had more time to produce, and one at a time. So, okay, first we're going to underline this and this and this. Okay, what are we going to do? Blah, blah, blah. Make sure that they actually know what they're doing. And then once you see they finish, give the next one and not all at once. The second thing, and I know this might be hard for university students, but this doesn't have to be always on the wall. It can be that you bring them, depending on the class when you think you're going to need them. And it was to have posters on the wall related to the target language, to the instructions of the activities. If you're going to do an activity that they are not familiar with, and even though you do instructing clearly and modeling, but maybe they're still going to have issues with it, then you can, have posters to make them easier. Because sometimes you've explained students, that's the other thing, you explain students so many times that they feel ashamed to keep asking. They feel ashamed to say, teacher, I still don't get what I'm going to do. So with this, they can just look at the posters and trying to make sense of what you're actually expecting from them. And the last one, and I would like to say this doesn't apply for university students, but I have found that for some classes they actually do, is setting the classroom rules from the very beginning, and even have them either copy them or have a copy of them or posting them on the class, so that you don't have to be asking everybody to be quiet or respecting the turns, or things that if we say once very clearly and firmly at the beginning, we expect not to happen. And a recommendation that I found from this, maybe many of you have done that, but is to tape yourself to actually know your teaching talking time, and what is causing you to speak more than your students at class. The other thing is that even though institutions may not have this exam that I talked about at the beginning, maybe they don't have a needs analysis at the beginning of the course, you can have one with your own students in order to, there was this teacher in, I forget. Okay, I think she was also from Asia. And what they did is that at the beginning of the class, she looked at the content of the course. She looked at the content and she applied some tests to her students to see, like I mentioned earlier, what were the struggling points for each of them. But she also asked them, what do you want to learn out of these that we have to cover on the semester? So she compared what they were struggling with what they wanted to learn, and she could use more wisely her time, planning only for making lesson plans only for what they need and also for what they want, and maybe skipping or not giving so much time to the things that they already know and they weren't even interested in. And obviously including in the lesson plan activities for speaking. vary the type of activities, and having clear objectives. In another study, they found, on the observations they make, they found that they ask a teacher their lesson plan. It was his lesson plan, I believe. And in his lesson plan, one of the objectives was to have a communicative class where he allowed his students to speak freely. But then, thank you. But then what happened when they came to observe the class and film it is that he was overcorrecting his students without even realizing it. So we have to set more realistic objectives or be mentally prepared to actually follow what we are setting as an objective. Well, I'll just look what's next. Okay, and another, well, he helps me with that. Another study that I forgot to mention is the relationship between, on the teaching of vocabulary, thank you, is the relationship between anxiety, knowing how, they did this experiment on how having more vocabulary reduce anxiety and increase the willingness to communicate. And it works, the less vocabulary the students have, the more anxious they felt, and the unwillingness to communicate was present. And it worked the other way around. When they felt like, I know this and I can actually use the words I've learned, they were more eager to speak in class. Okay. Now, I'm going to set a list of speaking activities that they are nothing new, but I would like you to think about and let me know if you think they are using speaking as a mean or as an end, and also what of the problems mentioned before or what of the solutions do they represent. For example, the debate activity, to have your students in a class discussion, do you think is using speaking as a mean or as an end? Okay, and what of the problems or what of the solutions could these represent? Of the ones mentioned. Just think about it if you don't have it right at hand. No. Problems with the attitudes of the teacher or of the student or of the institution. When I'm using debating in my class, I'm helping which one of this? Okay? Yes?
Will just remain quiet, some of the students.
Okay.
So the more talkative student will accomplish better ends or benefits, and
Okay.
there were other students that will not talk as much.
And how can we solve that?
Well, you have to assign time for each one member, maybe in the teams, or you have to balance up the time for interventions, students
Or also,
interventions.
sorry, thank you. See how desperate I am and I interrupt people. I'm sorry. And also what we were talking about, the interaction patterns. Maybe when I'm doing the teams, I have my high achievers with my low achievers so that they don't keep interrupting like I do. I'm sorry. The ones who are taking time to think. Okay. So making up a story. If I'm showing them pictures about what I did yesterday, for example, what do you think? This is as a mean or as an end? It depends. It's one of those neutral ones where maybe I saw once a teacher do this activity where she had the cards for the loteria, the Mexican, and the one they were taking out, they were inventing a part of the story with it. So obviously their grammar didn't really matter. She just wanted them to speak. But if I'm talking about the simple past and I want them to tell me what was happening last night, well, I'm using it as a mean. For example, expressing their wishes to a genie. What do you think? Is as a mean or as an end? Okay, this is actually one activity that I do with them. Is that 4th level? Where they have to see the grammar of wishes. I tell them, for example, you are the wish of love. You are the genie of love. You are the genie of health. You are the genie of appearance. And so students have to come to you and tell you, I wish I were more taller. I wish I were taller. Or I wish I had a boyfriend. Or I wish. So really, it's more using speaking as a mean because they are reviewing. Okay, impromptu speaking. Have you ever tried that in your classes? When you just tell, okay, I'm going to give you 1 minute to think. I'm going to give you a topic. 1 minute to think and 1 minute to speak about that topic. Do you think that's using as a mean or as an end? As an end, exactly. And this encourages fluency over accuracy. Taboo, where they have to guess the word. And for example, runway, where they have to describe what they're wearing. This is more as a what? As a mean or as an end. The same with explaining the routines and find someone who is a type of a drilling, because we're just changing. They already know how to make the question. They're just changing the question to different tenses. Okay, and this one is also from an article that I read. There are some neutral ones where I just want them to speak. I don't care if it's as a mean or as an end. So in Japan, what a teacher did is that when they came to class, they had to stand up. And when they participated in class, they gained the right to sit. And so students obviously hated it at first because they couldn't, until they spoke, they couldn't sit. But then she applied a questionnaire at the end of her course, and students said that otherwise they wouldn't have participated. So they actually liked it. They found it necessary. Some of them didn't enjoy it, but they found it necessary. So these might be a bit extreme. You are the ones who know your groups better, if they could work or not. But it doesn't matter if she asked me a question about, I don't know, the weather today or whatever. She's already speaking as an end because she's communicating, so she can sit. Or if about the class, she's giving me an example, then that is as a mean, but still she can sit. This is like a more neutral that we can use to force our students to speak. Okay, so speaking has been a challenge, I know. And if we think about it, and I'm going to ask you to just bring your mental images, on all these years, I don't know how long each one of you has been teaching, there have been moments when you just want to give up because they just won't speak. So think of those times, bring them to your mind, and just think that as challenging as they seemed, yes, it is a challenge, but it's a challenge that you accepted, which makes you be a very brave person. Not everyone will dare to do that, okay? And the speaking challenge that I mentioned at the beginning, that I found on YouTube that teenagers are doing nowadays, is that they have to, it's kind of silly, but what challenge isn't, right? They have to cover each other's mouths and say something embarrassing about the other person. And they tape themselves, and who understands teenagers, right? But instead of doing that, our speaking challenge today that I want to do really quick with you is that it is very difficult for a teacher to deal with the frustration of not having every single student speaking in class. But I know you have tried, and you're very brave for doing that. So your speaking challenge today would be to the people next to you, just praise them or congratulate them or tell them that they have done well, because sometimes we do need to hear that and nobody tells us. So please take a minute for doing our ELT version of the speaking challenge. You need more than 1 minute or what? Yes, 5 seconds to congratulate. Good job, Cesar. Good job. Okay, with everything you've done with your classes, trying to make them speak, I know you deserve more than 1 minute of praising, but we're running out of time. So well done, everyone. Thank you for accepting the challenge. You've done well, but if we are aware of what we might do better, this is going to benefit our students. And every time that I think of this, I remember what I decided to teach in the first place. I decided to teach because I believe that when a person has a second language or even a first language, they are empowered to communicate what they feel, what they think. So by teaching our students, or by teaching my students, this is my personal motivation for teaching. When I teach my students to speak English, I'm giving them a voice for their, I don't know, their needs, their ideals, their dreams to be heard out there in the world. And I know this is hard if you think of it, but this is how you need to look at it. That you're giving your students the voice to actually say something, whatever they might need to say, and be heard in more cultures, in more countries worldwide. And we do this, as challenging as it is, we do this because we care. And I have to remind myself of that because my favorite quote by Dr. Seuss says, unless someone like you cares a whole of, well, actually, I know it differently. Only someone like you cares a awful lot. Nothing is going to get better. It's not. So I want to thank you for caring, for giving the time, and I'm going to ask you to care even more and try to correct those things. And about my presentation, this would be it, but you made a promise to me at the beginning of the conference. And please, you can take a picture. This is the link to the survey that will help with a better understanding of how everything that I mentioned on the presentation is affecting and to what degree the challenges that our students are facing to improve their speaking skills. Okay, so I don't know if there are any questions for which I think I will answer them in private if you have any, or if you want to, here's also, if you, I don't know if you want the picture for the references of all the articles. See, we are not the only teachers in the world dealing with reticence. And I'm going to answer them in private because the closing ceremony is about to start. So thank you very much for your time and patience. And
Thank you very much to Ms. Evelyn Garza for sharing your valuable information this afternoon and receive this small gift for your participation in the LT seminar. So please, we ask you not to leave the room because we are going to continue with the closing ceremony.
Si me dan permiso, voy a hacer el cierre en español. Martín dijo que se puede usar el one. Yo oí eso. Cualquier queja es con Martín. Bueno, el español es lo que decimos desde el fondo del corazón. Es nuestro primer yo. Este evento hubiera sido absolutamente imposible sin el valor y la buena disposición de nuestros ponentes. Todos, a excepción de la doctora Grounds, quien fue invitada y quien recibió un contrato por venir a compartir con nosotros, que lo hubiera hecho gratuitamente, y lo cual era su intención y no lo permitimos. Pero todos, salvo ella, lo hicieron de manera totalmente desinteresada, totalmente gratuita. Todos sufrieron, soy testigo de los nervios y el estrés que les causó el participar como ponentes. Todos coincidimos en que pararse frente a un colega es una de las experiencias más difíciles que hay. Si vamos y damos una ponencia en Mextesol, en donde quieran, que no conozcamos a nadie que está ahí, es diferente. Pero cuando las personas que te están viendo son tus propios colegas, es otra cosa. Ellos tuvieron mucho valor, trabajaron muy duro y creo que ellos son quienes realmente merecen un aplauso muy grande, si me ayudan. Muchas gracias. Quiero reconocer el trabajo de los jefes de unidad porque gracias a ellos, a la colaboración con ellos también pudimos hacer que los equipos vinieran. También les pido otro aplauso para los jefes de unidad y los académicos de cada unidad. Y ahora quiero invitar a la maestra Melina García y a la maestra Gisela Ortiz a que me acompañen a entregar los reconocimientos para nuestros ponentes. Vamos a empezar con la maestra Gisela porque ella es ponente. Está creo que atrásito. Segundo, tercero. El que sigue. Ya estamos en desorden. Empezamos con Gis. Gis, muchísimas gracias por tu esfuerzo, por tu esmero y por tu ponencia. Tenemos a la maestra Elsa Galván. Maestra, muchas gracias. A la maestra Evelyn Garza, que acaba de exponer su trabajo de maestría. Él no está. Él no está. A la maestra Brenda Méndez Sosa, de Unidad Norte. Al maestro Miguel Ángel Ramos Arias, de Unidad Saltillo. A la maestra Maureen Morales Jaramillo. Se tuvo que ir, ok, tuvo una emergencia. Al maestro Said Artea, jefe de unidad de Torreón, que trajo porra además. Él tiene dos, no sé por qué. No, es la misma. Al profesor Martín Juárez García, quien se aventó 2 ponencias. ¿Otro? Él sí tiene 2. Él tiene 2. No sé si hay alguien más que esté. Bueno, queremos reconocer públicamente, obviamente, a la doctora Grounds, al maestro Evaristo Alférez y a Maureen, que no pudieron venir por sus reconocimientos. Quiero invitarlos a que en la siguiente ciclo de conferencias, en nuestro siguiente evento, que no sabemos cuándo vaya a ser, pero que seguramente volverá a pasar, las personas que hoy estuvieron escuchando se animen y nos den una ponencia. Quiero invitarlos a que no nada más, a quienes ya se animaron a participar aquí, no nada más lo hagamos a nivel local, creo que estamos listos para empezar a participar en el panorama nacional. Creo que hay quienes ya están listos para dar y dar ponencias en un Mextesol, en una NUPI, etcétera. Quiero invitarlos a continuar su desarrollo profesional. No siempre las oportunidades están en bandeja de plata, a veces hay que buscarlas, a veces hay que pagar, a veces hay que sacrificar mucho. Quiero reconocer a los profesores que empezaron su programa de estudio de la maestría, ya sea con Southampton o con cualquier otra institución o con sus doctorados. Quiero animarlos, quiero pedirles que no decaigan. A veces es muy difícil cuando uno está haciendo estudios de posgrado tener la resistencia y el valor de concluir. Creo que se han hecho esfuerzos muy importantes. A todos ellos, a todos ustedes que están haciendo ese esfuerzo, los felicito. Y creo que hay que ir todavía más para adelante. Quienes todavía no están haciendo una maestría, considérenlo. Les recomiendo, si queremos que este departamento se consolide y podamos llegar a ser una escuela, que le apuesten al ELT, que hagan su maestría en ELT y que pues sigamos creciendo. Gracias a todos por asistir y pues que se repita. Gracias.
Bueno, de 3 cosas. Foto grupal aquí enfrente todos. Y luego después si pueden pasar acá a la mesita a firmarnos como un yearbook. Y si alguien faltó de contestarnos una encuesta, también aquí los tiene la maestra Melina. Y por último, afuera hay una mesita también con material, pósters, con libretitas y plumas que nos sobraron y para que no se queden en la oficina. Si se quieren llevar más libretitas, más plumas, y pasen también por sus diplomas allá afuera. Y que contesten la encuesta de la maestra Evelyn también. Pero vénganse a tomarnos una foto todos juntos. Acomódense entre ustedes, teachers. Muevan las mesas y las sillas. Está Julieta. Vamos a tomar unas poquitas y luego ya nos las pasamos por el WhatsApp. Si no, no terminamos con todos los celulares. ¿Les tomo una con mi celular para ya pasarla? Sí, sí, sí. No sale, qué malo. La tapita, César, la tapita. Pues una silla. Yo. A ver, yo la tomo. Pero con un celular también. Pero desde ahí sí. Pero es una silla.
La panorámica. Pues,
Sí, una con el cel.
ese, buen punto. Las van a subir, pero no sabemos a dónde. Ay.
Yo la tomo.
No se muevan, yo la tomo. No se muevan. No se muevan, no se muevan, no se muevan. Yo la tomo.
Mónica la tomo.
No se muevan.
No se muevan.
Pero necesitamos acercarnos más.
Ah, sí está bien.
Arriba de la, o sea, ponte desde allá. Ajá.
Sí, no, ya no se muevan.
Ya no quisiera.
Ah, mira, acá la va a tomar exactamente.